Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really slice through the layers of complex events, getting to the core of what they mean for our world. You've been with us through the first two chapters of When the Signal Fails or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the AI Drone. We looked at that tense buildup, right? The subtle shifts, the warnings that, well, when ignored, the slow creep towards the edge. Now we're at the precipice. Today, our deep dive takes us right into chapter 3. It's titled simply Threshold. This is it, H-1, the critical day before H hour, the day before everything changes, irrevocably. Our mission here is to pull out the most chilling insights from these final 24 hours. Hours filled with denial, with dread, to help you understand not just what happened, but maybe more importantly, how. How does a world that seems stable, modern, just teeter on the absolute brink? And then how does it tumble with terrifying speed right into the abyss?
Yeah, and what's really striking about this chapter, as we dive into it, is the shift. The pace just picks up dramatically. Chapters 1 and 2, they built this sense of foreboding, didn't they? Kind of slow burn. Escalating tensions, yeah, but slow. Threshold, though. They're like a rapid-fire cascade of events. Bang, bang, bang. And for us, for the learners tuning in, this isn't just a list of things that happen. It's really an exploration of systemic failure. How do all these complex, interconnected systems, the ones designed to protect us, right? Global surveillance, internal security, infrastructure, even leadership. How do they begin to fail, one after another after another? It really asks us, at what point do we stop just noticing the cracks? When do we start feeling the whole structure actually collapsing around us?
Exactly. That's the horrifying shift, isn't it? When you go from being an observer, analyzing things from a distance, to suddenly being right in the middle of it. That distance just collapses. It becomes immediate, lived. So, yeah. Buckle up. We're about to unpack this final day, pretty much hour by hour, watching the world unravel. Let's start at the beginning. Those earliest, really unsettling signals. Okay, so our journey into this day of dread, it begins somewhere you wouldn't expect. 0.206, just after midnight, deep in the South Atlantic, vast remote. About 150 nautical miles south of Ascension Island, there's a British attack submarine, HMS Vigilant. Should have been routine patrol. But it picks up something, well, profoundly anomalous on its sonar. The EXO, the executive officer, apparently had this immediate gut feeling. This doesn't look right.
Right. And a key detail from the source that really jumps out is that raw sonar printout. It showed a flotilla, but it was described as too slow for a carrier group, too tight a formation for merchant shipping. It just didn't fit. It defied the usual naval classifications. So this isn't just, an unknown blip on the screen. It's a blip that doesn't fit any known pattern, which immediately triggers that sense of unease. Something's wrong here. Then they get periscope footage, and it confirms it, a Brazilian surface group. And not a small one either. 2 destroyers, 2 corvettes, 4 fast patrol ships, 5 support vessels. And, this is crucial, a retrofitted container ship.
That's a serious amount of hardware, even for an established Navy. But what really takes this from just unusual to properly alarming are the details mentioned. No flags, no AIS signals. Now, AIS, for anyone not familiar, it's the automatic identification system. Basically, a transponder ships need to broadcast who they are, where they are, their course. Switching it off, that's deliberate, that's stealth. And then there's the mention of at least one ship having electronic warfare domes, EW domes. These aren't for sending signals out. They're designed to jam enemy radar, disrupt communications, basically to make your fleet invisible or mask what it's doing. That's not for a friendly visit. That's a clear sign of offensive capability, or at least highly deceptive intentions.
Exactly. And if you put this in context, you've got a large, powerful fleet. It's operating dark, no ID. It's equipped for electronic deception. And it's threading the seam, as the source puts it, between commercial and military surveillance zones. That shows an incredibly sophisticated understanding of how global monitoring works. This isn't random. It's calculated. It's surgical almost. An evasion strategy, which implies a very specific and likely aggressive goal. The chilling takeaway here, I think, is how these early subtle signs of, geopolitical instability, they often just get missed or ignored. It really shows that tyranny of the normal, doesn't it? We expect things to be stable, so we rationalize away the anomalies. We dismiss them until the pattern, the collapse, is just undeniable.
It's like the silent scream before the storm hits, isn't it? Just picture that sonar printout, the periscope footage. This ghost fleet. Powerful, silent, moving through international waters. And maybe even more profound, as the source notes, is that London and Washington, they were told, immediately notified. Yet, neither government responded publicly. That's not just inaction. It hints at something deeper. Paralysis, maybe. Denial. At the very highest levels, it sets such a grim tone for the whole day. The alarm bells are ringing loud and clear, but nobody's picking up the phone. So while that anxiety is simmering under the waves, thousands of miles away, the quiet unease of the South Atlantic, it's about to be completely overshadowed by something very public, very provocative, playing out in the skies over Asia. Okay, so barely 3 hours later, it's 03:00 Washington, D.C. time. The global chessboard sees another move, an aggressive one, and much more overt this time. China launches what they call a routine ballistic missile test, supposedly for weapons validation. Standard stuff, they say. But as we quickly find out, this seemingly innocent action, it's cover for something much, much bolder. Within minutes, 50 Chinese military aircraft, and we're talking bombers, refueling tankers, not just a couple of fighters, penetrate Taiwanese airspace.
Yeah, it's a classic feint, isn't it? A calculated distraction. The routine missile test is just smoke and mirrors, designed to draw eyes away while this huge show of force unfolds. And the sheer number of 50 aircraft, including heavy bombers, that just underscores the gravity, the scale. This wasn't some minor probe. This was a full-scale demonstration. Psychological, military, a deliberate violation of sovereign airspace. Down in Taipei, the air raid sirens are wailing. Scramble orders go out. Taiwanese jets get airborne. But the critical detail, the really telling part, is they held fire, which suggests this incredibly tense, incredibly controlled situation. Escalation was like millimeters away, but it was avoided. Still, the intent, as the source says, was unmistakable.
Yeah. And then silence. After all that, the sky just fell silent again. Everyone's waiting, right? Holding their breath, waiting for the retaliation, for the first shots of a war. But it didn't come. Not yet, anyway. What makes this particularly chilling for us, for you listening, is seeing how these incredibly overt acts of aggression can just hang there in this precarious balance. This regional power play takes the world right to the brink, but without that immediate military action, it relies on the psychological weight, the threat itself. It's that calm before the storm and the waiting, the uncertainty. It's almost worse than the fight itself. It's a clear test of resolve, a strong message, and yeah, a move that could easily ignite a major conflict.
It really raises fascinating questions, doesn't it? About modern deterrence, about the actual threshold for conflict. When an incursion this massive doesn't immediately trigger kinetic engagement, what does that mean? Is it a Taiwanese restraint? Or maybe a deep-seated fear of global escalation on all sides? Or maybe even an inability to respond effectively against such overwhelming numbers? We don't know for sure. But that silence afterwards, it creates this unbearable tension, a palpable sense of dread, like something much worse is still coming. It's a strategic power play, designed to assert dominance, test the boundaries, push right up to the line without crossing it. For now, it's just a vivid demonstration of how quickly that geopolitical chessboard can be reset with new, much more dangerous rules.
Right. And from this brinkmanship, this tense standoff, the world is about to see direct, devastating kinetic strikes. This is where those abstract threats become very, very concrete destruction. Okay, just 45 minutes after that Chinese incursion, 03:45 Gulf time, the world literally feels the shockwaves of another major attack. Iran strikes. And this was not small scale, not by any measure. A coordinated strike launched from their southwestern region, the primary target, Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura refinery. And just for context, Ras Tanura isn't just any oil facility. It is the largest offshore oil facility globally, a critical node. The world's energy supply runs through places like this. The weapons they used, formidable. 12 Zulfikar 2 hypersonic missiles, each carrying a 500-kilogram warhead, a half-ton payload each, and out of those 12, 8 hit their target.
The precision and the destructive power here, it's truly alarming. 8 successful hits, each with a half-ton warhead, right on the largest offshore oil facility on the entire planet. The source details, it says by 03:49, just 4 minutes after the strike began, Ras Tanura ceased to exist in a rising tower of fire and black smoke visible from the coast of Bahrain. This is a direct, overwhelming act of economic warfare, targeting the absolute lifeblood of global commerce and the use of hypersonic missiles that travel at incredible speeds, making them almost impossible to intercept. That highlights advanced capabilities. It shows how difficult defense against these kinds of weapons really is. The rapid, total destruction of such a critical facility. I mean, the implications are immediate, catastrophic for global energy markets, even before they officially opened for the day.
The impact was undeniable. You had shockwaves picked up by seismic stations, sensors on oil platforms across the region, all in real time. Global surveillance satellites relayed infrared footage, firestorms, painting this horrifying picture for every intelligence agency in the West. It was immediately called the largest attack on energy infrastructure since Apocalyptic, which was, a major benchmark for this kind of devastation. And this wasn't even an isolated incident. Just 20 minutes later, 04:05. While the Gulf is literally burning, a Liberian-flagged oil tanker leaving Port Sudan in the Red Sea is hit midship by a Houthi-fired anti-ship ballistic missile. Fuel tanks detonate, flames shoot hundreds of meters high, half the crew killed instantly.
Right. And placing these two events together, The Iranian strike on Ras Tanura is clearly the main event, right? It's the critical, high-impact blow to global commerce, to resources. The Red Sea incident, while absolutely tragic for everyone involved, it gets contextually overshadowed by the sheer scale of the catastrophe in the Gulf, which really vividly illustrates how quickly major events can just eclipse each other in a cascade of crises like this. Attention, resources, they get pulled in multiple directions all at once. And the Houthi statement that came out within 30 minutes. This is a warning to Zionists and Western invaders. The Red Sea belongs to the resistance. It clearly lays out their defiance, their regional agenda. But the source notes, and this is chilling, no one listened. Everyone was busy watching the Gulf burn. It highlights this dangerous fragmentation of attention in a crisis that's just rapidly escalating everywhere.
It shows you, directly, the immediate devastating consequences of attacking critical global infrastructure, and how fast a regional conflict can spiral out have truly global implications. Just picture it. A rising tower of fire and black smoke visible from the coast of Bahrain. It's apocalyptic. And the irony, global oil markets about to open, staring right into that firestorm. So these huge international fires are raging, but even as the world is grappling with these external kinetic threats, an insidious internal breakdown starts to grip one of the world's major powers. So while the world is reeling from these external attacks, something truly shocking, really unprecedented unfolds inside the United States. It's 06:00 a.m. Sacramento, California. Governor Luis Delgado's convoy is heading to the State Emergency Operations Center, a critical trip, right, given the growing global crisis. But an intersection outside Folsom, it becomes the scene of this meticulously planned ambush. A black SUV, federal plates, ATF markings, cuts right in front of the motorcade. Then two more pull-up, men jump out, full tactical gear, badges, insignias, the works. Everything looked official, like federal agents.
The audacity here. And the level of deception involved. It's just striking. They deliberately used the public's trust in federal agencies, didn't they?
Yeah.
Making it incredibly hard for the state troopers to immediately see them as a threat. It's like psychological warfare, but applied domestically. A masterclass almost. But then the attack itself just escalates dramatically. They open fire, and then a suicide drone comes down right into the second vehicle in the convoy, kills 3 state troopers instantly. This is unprecedented, terrifying.
Yeah.
Using that kind of advanced weaponry against a governor's convoy on U.S. soil, it signals a horrific new level of, well, is it domestic terrorism? Or more likely, foreign infiltration. It completely shatters that clear line between internal and external threats.
And it gets even stranger, more sinister. As the attack unfolds, one attacker shouts orders. In Brazilian Portuguese, another one curses in some unfamiliar dialect. The state troopers return fire, kill 3 of these imposters. But the rest, they just vanish as quickly as they appeared. Later, forensics confirmed something truly chilling. None of the attackers were American citizens, all identified as South Brazilian nationals. And they were carrying meticulously forged DHS credentials. Diplomatic cards, too. This isn't just random violence. It implies a deeply embedded, highly coordinated plot, reaching right into the heart of a U.S. state. It suggests, what people call a 5th column operating inside.
Yeah, this incident isn't just about a foreign attack, is it? It's a chilling demonstration of asymmetric warfare perfected. Turning a nation's own trust, its own institutions, against itself, creating this internal paralysis that no conventional army could achieve. It reveals its critical vulnerability. When foreign actors can operate with such impunity, disguised as federal agents, using advanced weapons internally, it just shatters that illusion of internal safety. For you listening, this highlights how quickly those lines can blur. Domestic law enforcement versus foreign threat, creating chaos, distrust right from within. That deception was so well crafted, wasn't it? The federal plates, the full tactical gear, everything looked official. And then the brutal surprise of the suicide drone. It's just a chilling testament to the depth of the infiltration, the weaponization of trust.
And this brazen attack, it immediately triggers a profound crisis, a crisis of authority within California itself. Just a few hours later, 08:45 a.m., the repercussions are already devastating. The lieutenant governor gets sworn in at the state capitol, but not under normal circumstances. No, she's under armed guard. And the decision made almost instantly. Declare martial law, statewide.
And what really stands out here is the speed, the severity of the state's reaction. Declaring martial law by a state against federal entities, that's extraordinary, almost unthinkable in the U.S. system. It signals a complete breakdown, federal-state relations just collapsing, a severe challenge to central authority. Basically, the state turning into the federal government. State police immediately surround all ATF offices. Several federal buildings are sealed off, and this ignites armed standoffs. In Sacramento, in Los Angeles, pushing the nation towards this internal conflict that kind of mirrors the global instability we were just talking about.
Yeah, and the source notes something truly chilling here. It captures the essence of this breakdown perfectly. It says, the federal chain of command began to fragment. People didn't know who to trust. Uniforms weren't enough anymore. That line, uniforms weren't enough anymore. It just perfectly captures that erosion of institutional trust, a direct, devastating consequence of the attack on Delgado, of finding out about the imposters. For us, for you, this illustrates how quickly internal cohesion can just collapse. When trust in institutions evaporates like that, it leads to this potentially dangerous decentralization of power, a complete breakdown of civil order.
And placing this in the broader context, what does it actually mean for a country when its own internal structures start turning on each other, especially during a major national crisis? This internal fracturing, it severely weakens the nation's ability to respond to external threats, to other unfolding disasters. The fear, the confusion among ordinary people, not knowing who represents legitimate authority anymore. You can almost feel it, it's palpable. It's a descent into chaos from within, just when external threats demand a united front. Imagine that visual. State police surrounding federal buildings, tense armed confrontations erupting in major cities. It's a stark, terrifying image of a nation tearing itself apart, right at its foundational seams.
So as California is grappling with this internal strife, its authority crumbling, another cross-border flashpoint ignites, and this one is fueled by something new in the mix, online information and raw emotion. Okay, 09:05 a.m., off the Florida Straits, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter is on patrol near international waters. It gets intercepted by a Cuban Navy patrol boat, and this Cuban boat is operating way outside its recognized area, really pushing the boundaries. What starts as an exchange of shouted warnings and insults, pretty standard, maybe quickly, terrifyingly escalates.
And a key detail here, the one that really jumps out, is the trigger for this escalation. The Cubans, the source tells us, were specifically angered by the slaughter they saw online in Florida. And that anger leads them to open fire. Automatic bursts across the cutter's bow. That detail is just crucial. It highlights how fast a tense situation can turn lethal, especially when emotions are running high. But critically, when information or maybe even misinformation spreading through unofficial online channels becomes a direct trigger for military action. It completely bypasses diplomacy, traditional chains of command. It shows this dangerous new vector for conflict emerging.
And the Coast Guard response, it was swift, precise, lethal. They returned fire, disabled the Cuban patrol boat, left it burning within minutes. Havana's reaction afterwards was just as stark. No apology, no explanation, just silence.
Which just amplifies that sense of unraveling, doesn't it? It indicates a breakdown not just of communication, but of diplomatic norms. Or maybe it's intentional, a deliberate lack of accountability. For us, this really illustrates that volatile mix: information, raw emotion, military capability, all coming together to ignite these localized conflicts during a larger breakdown. It shows the immense danger when official channels fail, leaving this vacuum that gets filled by social media, by unverified reports, by pure anger.
Right. And putting this in the broader context, it raises that important question. How do these perceived humanitarian crises, these online narratives, even if they're totally unverified, how do they affect international relations, military actions? Especially when formal communications are clearly failing. It demonstrates this dangerous ripple effect, where domestic chaos, like we saw unfolding in California, can quickly spill over, become international armed conflict, driven by incomplete, maybe sensationalized information. It's such a stark contrast, isn't it, between the initial shouted warnings and insults and then, boom, this rapid, deadly exchange of fire. That image of the disabled, burning Cuban boat, it's a symbol of how fast things can spiral when those traditional guardrails are just gone.
So all these military crises, these internal political crises, are all unfolding, but critically, they're happening against the backdrop of something even more terrifying, a silent enemy that's simultaneously decimating the highest levels of government. Okay, by 10 a.m., this crisis reaches the absolute heart of American power. The White House Situation Room, President Walter H. Emerson, he's described as slumped in his chair.
Yeah.
Amidst what the source just called chaos, he's getting the Surgeon General's report on an illness they're no longer calling the flu. Internally, they've given it a name, Helsing Virus Type B. Well, polit. And the statistics presented, they're grim, absolutely merciless.
Yeah, that deliberate shift in name from the relatively benign, the flu, to the ominous Helsing Virus Type B. That's a critical turning point, isn't it? It's the moment denial finally gives way to this horrifying reality. The numbers, they are truly horrifying. 55,000 dead, over 110,000 in critical condition nationwide. The neurological survival rate, under 10%. Estimated fatality rate, a staggering 74%. And they're projecting millions infected by midnight, less than 14 hours away. The description of the symptoms: seizures, rapid neural degeneration, hemorrhagic symptoms. It paints this picture of an extremely virulent, extremely deadly pathogen. far, far beyond any conventional flu.
But here's where it gets truly, truly chilling. While nobody knew its exact origin at this point, both the CIA and the CDC had apparently converged on this horrifying belief. It was seeded intentionally, a bioweapon. This just elevates the whole crisis. From a public health emergency, however dire, to a deliberate, targeted act of war. It adds this layer of dread of betrayal that's almost unfathomable. President Emerson, the source says, didn't speak, didn't need to. The gravity was clear, a silent acknowledgement of an enemy more insidious than any missile.
And putting this in context, what's the psychological impact, the strategic impact of knowing that this devastating disease is an intentional bioweapon, especially when leadership is already under immense pressure from all these other crises? It transforms it, doesn't it? From a natural disaster to a targeted attack. It demands a completely different kind of response, a response that perhaps no one is ready to give, or even capable of giving. The sheer scale of human suffering unfolding silently, it's immense. Such a stark, terrifying contrast to the loud military conflicts we've just discussed. For you listening, this reveals the true, insidious horror of a bioweapon attack. How it can paralyze even the most powerful governments, leaving one official, Julie Adler, just sitting there quietly, scribbling lines for a speech she desperately hopes will never be given. A speech for a world that's fundamentally broken.
And the overwhelming weight of this silent internal crisis, compounded by all the external pressures, it just proves too much for the current leadership. Just over an hour after getting that grim report, 11:06 a.m., President Emerson tries to stand up. His hand misses a railing. He staggers once and then collapses. Massive stroke. Emergency medical teams are there in under 2 minutes. CPR, stabilization, but the damage is done. Irreversible.
The suddenness here, the catastrophic incapacitation of the president, the ultimate symbol of stability, of command, right in the midst of this cascade of crises, it creates this immediate, profound power vacuum, further destabilizing a nation that's already reeling. The vice president is sworn in swiftly, 11:58 a.m., invoking the 25th Amendment. That's the constitutional provision for presidential disability succession. It underscores the urgency, the severity of this leadership crisis. It's an act of continuity, sure, but it's one born out of absolute necessity, extreme duress, and it highlights how quickly even the highest office can be compromised in something like this.
And the impact of this Helsing virus, it isn't just on the president. It's tearing through the entire government apparatus, the White House itself, struggling. 24 staffers infected, several departments running on skeleton crews, just unable to function properly. And critically, the National Military Command Center, the NMCC, the Pentagon's global command hub for nuclear forces, conventional forces, it's operating off disconnected backup systems. That detail alone, it speaks volumes about the severe degradation of national security infrastructure. DEFCON, the defense readiness condition, it's still at 4, normal peacetime readiness. But the unspoken truth is clear. Everyone knew that would change. It's this terrifying gap between protocol and the actual reality on the ground.
And putting this in the broader context, it raises that critical question. What happens when the highest levels of a government are physically compromised by an attack, when its command and control structures are failing? It highlights this critical vulnerability in national security, doesn't it? It shows how a biological weapon can dismantle a nation's ability to respond just as effectively, maybe more effectively, than a conventional strike. The fact that DEFCON is still at 4, while the world is literally unraveling, it suggests either a profound failure to grasp the severity across all layers of command, or maybe a critical inability to even execute the necessary protocols. For you listening, this shows that cascading effect, where even the president isn't immune, where the fundamental structures of power just start to crumble, leaving a vacuum at the worst possible moment.
So while America's leadership struggles, its internal structures falter. The global stage just continues its descent into chaos, with new forms of warfare emerging, blurring the lines between peace and aggression, between cyber and kinetic. Okay, by 13:00, that's 1 p.m. over in New Delhi, India announces it's placing all its armed forces on full alert. This isn't a minor thing, it's a monumental move, a clear signal of heightened readiness. The INS Vikramaditya, their aircraft carrier, a real centerpiece of their naval power, is immediately rerouted to the Bay of Bengal. At the same time, the Indian Army starts massing units along the northern frontier with China. This is India signaling a very clear defensive stance, maybe even potentially offensive, responding directly to the escalating global instability, especially, you'd think, amplified by China's actions over Taiwan earlier.
Yeah, that aggressive military posture from India. It seems like a direct, almost certainly amplified response to those rising geopolitical tensions. It demonstrates this heightened sense of alert, readiness for conventional warfare. They're preparing for what they clearly see as an imminent threat on their borders. It's a classic, if massive, military mobilization reacting to global instability, a nation bracing itself. It feels like an old world response, though, doesn't it, to what's rapidly becoming a very new world kind of problem.
Exactly. Because then, just an hour later, 2:00 p.m., the nature of the conflict just shifts dramatically away from conventional military moves towards something far more insidious. A phased cyber attack begins, targeting Pakistan. Within minutes, the lights go out. In Pakistan's three largest cities, just gone. Banks go offline, cell networks fail, national television cuts to static, internet access completely collapses. This wasn't just, a disruption. This was total nationwide paralysis of critical infrastructure. And to make it even worse, alongside the cyber attack, drones strike 8 urban towers in Islamabad, disabling key physical infrastructure as well. Chaos just erupts. Islamabad, Multan, Muzaffargarh, as the modern world just evaporated for millions of people.
And placing this in context, this represents a far more insidious modern form of warfare, doesn't it? This isn't conventional kinetic war in the way we usually think about it. It's sophisticated, multi-pronged. Cyber attacks coupled with targeted drone strikes, designed specifically to induce widespread chaos, societal breakdown, without needing a direct military invasion. It's about crippling a nation from within, silently, effectively. And the fact that no one claimed responsibility for these attacks, that adds another terrifying layer: fear, uncertainty. It prevents a clear, immediate response. It severely exacerbates global instability because nations are left guessing who did this, why, leading to potential miscalculation, further escalation.
For you listening, this illustrates the devastating potential of these coordinated attacks. Cyber plus drones, crippling a nation from within, changing the very nature of conflict. Imagine that suddenness. The lights went out across major cities, that cascading failure of modern life. Banks, cell networks, internet, all gone. It's an invisible enemy that can bring an entire country to its knees, silently plunging millions into a pre-digital dark age. And from this silent digital war, we turn to a stark public confession from a U.S. governor, exposing a horrifying reality that had been deliberately hidden. So while this silent war rages digitally, while leaders maneuver globally, at 5:30 p.m., a gut-wrenching scene unfolds on live television in Florida. The new governor appears before the cameras, but the backdrop, it's chilling, visceral, bodies being loaded onto flatbeds, being burned in makeshift pyres. This is the unvarnished, brutal reality of the Helsing Virus Type B, laid bare, no more abstract numbers. The governor then makes the shocking public confession. "We were lying," she says, her voice cracking. "We underreported. We withheld data."
The audacity there, and just the profound horror of that moment, it's striking. That visual backdrop, bodies being loaded onto flatbeds and burned in makeshift pyres, it's incredibly visceral, stark. It brings those abstract numbers into this sickening, undeniable reality. And the governor's confession, "We were lying," it just shatters any remaining public trust, exposes the catastrophic extent of the cover-up. It's a betrayal from within. She then reveals the true numbers, a stark contrast to what people had been told before. Over 56,000 dead, 100,000 critically ill, fatality rate above 75%. Those numbers are astronomically higher than previous reports, just showcasing the devastating scale of the deception.
And then, in this raw, profoundly human moment, it just underscores the immense pressure, the horror of the crisis. The broadcast ends with the governor turning away from the camera and vomiting.
Yeah.
Behind a white van, that image, the governor turning away, vomit, it's just so raw, isn't it? It strips away all the political facade, leaves just the sheer visceral horror of the situation. For us, for you, this is a gut-wrenching moment. It reveals the true, unvarnished horror of the epidemic and, tragically, the moral collapse of leadership under extreme, unimaginable pressure. It's the point where the weight of it all, the magnitude of their deception, literally makes them physically sick.
And placing this in the broader context, it would raise that really difficult question. What happens to a society when its leaders not only fail to protect it, but actively mislead it about a catastrophe of this scale, this confession? It creates irreparable damage to public trust. It could fuel further civil unrest, adding yet another layer of internal destabilization to an already fractured nation. For the public, it's like the final bond of trust is broken. It reveals this desperation that's almost worse than the virus itself, because it shows the leaders, too, are simply overwhelmed. Maybe even broken. It's not just statistics anymore. It's a living nightmare, brought into sickening clarity.
So, as the truth of the epidemic finally emerges, the most direct, chilling blow to the United States comes, not from missiles, not from disease, not from visible destruction, but from an invisible enemy. 2112 NEP code, 2100, 9 p.m. U.S. Cyber Command, Fort Meade. The source says the real blow came quietly, not a missile, not an airstrike. It was code. Oh no. This describes a truly catastrophic nation-state level cyber attack designed to achieve strategic effects without any physical destruction at all. Malicious firmware, already embedded deep within critical infrastructure, telecom hubs, electrical transformers, cell towers, it just begins executing, like these pre-planted ticking time bombs hidden inside the system itself.
The insidious nature of this attack, that's what's striking. The fact that the firmware was already embedded, that highlights a long-term sophisticated infiltration. An enemy patiently waiting inside the very systems meant to support modern life. It's a profound betrayal of digital trust. In targeting those specific things, telecom hubs, electrical transformers, cell towers, communication satellites, that signifies an intent to completely paralyze the nation. Its ability to communicate, transmit data, coordinate, effectively blinding and deafening it, severing its modern nervous system, and the absence of kinetic impacts. That makes the attack incredibly hard to counter, doesn't it? The damage is done internally, by its own systems turning against it. It's like an act of digital self-immolation.
And the result is immediate. Terrifying. 2 American communications satellites blinked out of operation. The description is just chilling. There were no kinetic impacts, just silence. The data feeds died. For you listening, this is a chilling example of how this invisible war, waged purely through code, can be even more devastating than conventional weapons. It creates this terrifying void, just silence. It's the ultimate stealth attack. Leaves no craters, no rubble, just a gaping silent hole in the fabric of modern existence.
And putting this in the broader context, it raises that critical question. What does it actually mean for a modern, interconnected nation when its fundamental communication, its data infrastructure, is just silently severed? This attack profoundly undermines military command and control, civilian coordination for emergency services, even basic public information channels. Everything relies on that flow of data. It suggests this vulnerability that can be exploited for complete systemic shutdown. That's silence. It's not just an absence of sound. It's the absence of information, of connection, of control. It's a void that will inevitably, immediately be filled with fear and panic.
So with communication severed, systems failing, the final desperate attempts to regain control unfold against a backdrop of imminent, complete darkness. It's 22:00 now, 10 p.m. In the White House bunker, President Emerson's successor, the one sworn in just hours ago under the shadow of crisis, issues the gravest order imaginable. Raise DEFCON to 3, prepare strategic forces. Now, DEFCON, the defense readiness condition, going from 4, which is normal peacetime, to 3, that's a serious escalation. It signifies a credible threat of war, possibly nuclear. But the order, urgent as it is, it's immediately undercut by this horrifying operational reality.
Yeah, the disconnect here, it's profound, between the command given and the actual capability to execute it, between the theoretical power and the practical impotence. The staff, the very people needed to carry out such a critical order, they're described as falling apart. Many are infected by the Helsing virus. Others are just unreachable because of the communications blackout we just talked about. The nuclear chain of command, the most secure, most critical system the nation has, it is completely fractured. Some missile silos have no active comms. They can't receive orders. Some submarines, part of that nuclear triad, are out of position. They're not where they're supposed to be. Even the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, the PEOC, designed for the absolute worst crises, it's operating only via manual override systems, which just highlights this severe degradation of capabilities.
And the stark conclusion from the source, it hits like a punch to the gut. The world was spiraling, and America wasn't ready. For us, for you, this reveals the ultimate vulnerability, doesn't it?
Yes.
Even the most advanced military capabilities, they're useless without a functioning command structure, without reliable communications, without healthy, uncompromised personnel. It leaves a nation exposed, unprepared, facing potential global annihilation, maybe partly from its own inability to act, to respond, to even communicate the most vital of orders.
And putting this in the broader context, it raises that terrifying question. What happens when a superpower orders its strategic forces to prepare for the unthinkable, but its own command systems are failing, its people are compromised? It creates this terrifying scenario: potential miscalculation, accidental launch, or just total inability to respond to external threats. That statement, America wasn't ready, it's such a grim, almost fatalistic assessment of where the nation is. On the absolute eve of collapse, it shows how quickly internal and external pressures can converge to render even the most powerful nation, well, impotent. The greatest deterrent in the world is useless when the finger on the button can't reach it. or doesn't even know where it is anymore.
So all these failures, the global threats, the internal fracturing, the silent epidemic, the cyber warfare, the collapse of leadership, they all just converge into a single overwhelming catastrophe. That plunges the continental United States into darkness. 23:11 p.m. As the clock ticks down towards H hour, a witness in Philadelphia describes the experience with these haunting, almost poetic words. The streetlights blinked like dying candles, then the sound went hollow, like everything around me was breathing out for the last time. Just 30 minutes later, 23:30, the power failure has cascaded across the entire continental USA.
And what's really striking here, this is it, the climactic physical manifestation of the systemic collapse, the culmination of all those cyber attacks on infrastructure, the internal chaos. That witness's description, it's so vivid, profound. It captures the sensory impact, the emotional impact of a nationwide blackout, blinked like dying candles. It evokes a sense of fragile, fading life, doesn't it? An entire modern civilization just flickering out. And the sound went hollow, like everything around me was breathing out for the last time. That conveys this chilling sense of finality. An entire civilization exhaling its last breath. And the phrase cascaded across the continental USA, that signifies total widespread systemic failure, not just local outages, complete encompassing darkness, coast to coast.
For us, for you listening, this is the ultimate aha moment, isn't it? The direct, undeniable impact of everything that came before. All those failures converging. It illustrates just how fragile our reliance on modern infrastructure truly is, how quickly it can all just disappear. Imagine the immediate consequences, the long-term ones, of a continental power grid failure. In a world already in chaos, no communication, no light, no heat or cooling for millions, no modern conveniences, no logistics, no emergency services. It plunges millions into this primal darkness, uncertainty, effectively reverting society to a pre-industrial state overnight. It's the moment the threshold isn't just crossed, it's obliterated.
Right. And placing this in the broader context, it highlights how deeply intertwined our lives are with these invisible systems, doesn't it? The power grid, the internet, satellites. When they collectively fail, society as we know it simply ceases to function. The sheer scale of this blackout just underscores that the threshold hasn't just been crossed anymore. It's been dramatically shattered. It's a sobering reminder, isn't it, that our advanced civilization is built on this surprisingly delicate lattice of unseen connections. And when those connections are severed, the world transforms in an instant.
And that dramatic finality of chapter 3, it leaves us just contemplating the abyss. Hashtag outro. So we've just spent a day at the threshold, witnessing this terrifying acceleration of crises, global, domestic, as depicted in When the Signal Fails, from those covert naval maneuvers way down in the South Atlantic, the provocative flights over Taiwan, to devastating energy strikes in the Gulf and the Red Sea. We saw that insidious internal attack on a U.S. governor in California, the horrifying truth of a silent, deadly bioweapon finally coming out, and then the ultimate quiet blow, that nationwide cyber attack that brought down the lights.
Yeah, this deep dive really reveals how quickly a world built on these interconnected systems can just unravel, how trust can be shattered at every single level, from international diplomacy right down to state-federal relations, even the trust citizens place in their own leaders. It just evaporates. It shows how even the most powerful nations can be brought to their knees by this confluence of threats, internal, external, kinetic, digital, often working together, reinforcing each other's destructive power. It's just a stark reminder, isn't it, of the incredibly fragile balance we take for granted every day in our modern lives.
As those streetlights blinked out across an entire continent, truly like dying candles, this deep dive shows us just how quickly that threshold of collapse can be crossed. And it leaves us wondering, doesn't it, what truly happens when the signal fails, when the systems we rely on just stop breathing. What does life look like for those left in the dark? Confronting a world stripped bare of its modern conveniences, its certainties? Think about that. What it would mean for you. Until our next deep dive.